Hi, I'm Asetoni, and this is my review of the closed online test of the upcoming Comrades multiplayer DLC for Final Fantasy XV. While this is primarily meant to be a review of the test, I'll also give some feedback on the mechanics of the DLC in case the extremely unlikely scenario happens and somebody at Square watches this video and actually gives a shit. Also, a quick warning, there will be spoilers for the main game as well as this DLC. The online test wasn't exactly there to sell the story, but it is important for many fans of Final Fantasy XV. From numerous clues, it's safe to say that Comrades takes place during the World of Ruin, when the world was engulfed in darkness. I personally love the apocalyptic setting, and I'm overall very excited for the story part of this DLC as well. All story that there was to the actual missions was just justification for the mission to happen, however, they're most likely just trying to avoid spoilers. There was one major plot hole though, there was way too much light for the World of Ruin. In chapter 12 the world was completely dark, save for like 2 or so hours of daylight, and in chapter 14 Talcott says that the world had been dark ever since Noctis disappeared. The sun isn't visible, but it's still way brighter than it should be. However, I'm willing to forgive this because this was probably just an artistic decision. The combat system is pretty much just a well-refined version of the base game system. It's an improvement on almost every front, and I'm happy to see that the people at Square seem to understand what went wrong with the combat of Final Fantasy XV and what aspects of the system were good. Let's start with the big thing, difficulty. There is some. Not a whole lot, but you can actually die this time around. This is easily the biggest thing Final Fantasy needed, not because I need to bolster my gamer ego by saying I beat that boss, therefore I'm better than you, but for a player's choices and actions to be meaningful, there needs to be a fail state. This is doubly true for the multiplayer experience, because player interaction needs to influence the outcome, otherwise it might as well be single player with a chat. There are 2 large changes to the combat system that made it more difficult, the first one of them being an overhaul of the dodging system. You no longer just hold down a button and become almost invulnerable until you get bored or decide to kill whatever is attacking you. You got 3 main ways to avoid damage. A classic dodge roll which is instant iframes but also recovery frames, so it needs to be timed. A shield that is not instant but stuns enemies and can potentially cost a lot of MP. And the warp, which is like the dodge except it takes you farther at the cost of not having instant invincibility. Unlike the phasing system for the majority of the base game, all of these require a form of timing or have a meaningful cost associated with them. None of them also cancel recovery times, unlike Blink, which means overextending is heavily punished. However, possibly the bigger reason why Comrades has some semblance of difficulty is that the item system is replaced by the cure spell, so no more free heals and reviving yourself. Oh wait, what is this? Oh no. Yeah, so this is slightly worrying. Let's just hope it's better balanced than what we have in the base game. There is some hope at least, since whatever menu the items are in obviously can't pause the game this time around, and this description might imply that you can't have 99 of every item with you on the field. Also, the general lack of unnecessary iframes during warp strikes, for example, suggests to me that you could at least take damage while you spam potions. Also, apparently glaives cannot use items to restore HP on the field, so maybe these items are just for buffs. Moving on, I wonder how this difficulty is going to be balanced in the end. Are you able to beat everything with just AI partners, or do you need a heavily optimized team with voice chat in order to beat some of the harder missions? Personally, I hope there is at least some content that requires high skill and teamwork in order to complete, even if the rewards were purely cosmetic. At this stage, it's almost impossible to say, so we'll just have to wait and see. The weapons in the test were mostly good. Their movesets had more depth to them than most weapons in the base game, and all but one were usable and served a purpose. Most, if not all, animations were recycled. The shuriken melee combo is from Sword of the Wise, the katana moves are from Core, most dagger moves are from Ignis, etc. However, I don't see why this is a bad thing. The animations flow well and, well, they look good. And I like that resources weren't wasted on animating and were instead put to better use somewhere else. All of the weapons still feel vastly different from their base game counterparts, but the animations add a sense of familiarity to the combat and the DLC as a whole. I said all weapons except one seem to serve a purpose. That one is the mace class. That weapon just made absolutely no sense to me. It was comically slow, yet it had similar damage to the infinitely faster katana. A fully charged mace opener deals about 1000 damage to Praktuar, and the katana deals about 700 to 800 damage with a normal opener. And Praktuar is weak to maces. It just makes no sense why this weapon's damage is so low. I get that it probably has a very high break and vulnerability modifier, but the other weapons seem to be able to match that simply due to their speed. And there just are not enough benefits to breaking parts or causing vulnerability that they justify a non-existent damage output and a horrendous animation lock. Daggers, on the other hand, felt overpowered. They have the highest damage output and the lowest animation lock, which is fine, but then they also have the best stagger potential with their forward attack. Then the dodge rolls are just like the katana's sidestep, except they also have iframes. But really, they weren't nearly as big of an issue as the mace was. You know what? Just give the daggers kick into combo ender ability to the mace. Now the mace actually has the best stagger potential and not daggers, and as a result you might even want to use it every once in a while. Moving on, the magic system lacks the customization and innovation of Elemancy, but makes up for it by being fun to use and balanced. By default, you've got two spells, a normal cure and an offensive spell that looks and feels like a fart. However, equipping certain weapons and royal sigils can change these spells into something else. For example, equipping the Ashura Katana changes the default attack spell into a fire spell, and equipping the Sigil of the Tall changes my cure spell into Aura. On top of this, certain weapons incorporate spells into their moveset. Normally casting spells costs MP, but these spells are completely free to use. I like this magic system because despite the spells being somewhat generic, they're all useful, and the spells being tied to weapons and the different ways to cast them provide a lot of freedom for customization, which can result in some interesting combinations. Speaking of customization, there are no accessories anymore, and outfits are just cosmetic and part of the character creation. The only thing you can equip besides your weapons is a royal sigil. These function similarly to accessories, but are more like a bunch of accessories combined into one package. They essentially define your class or role. There were only 4 sigils in the test version, but the fact that they were named after royal arms leads me to believe that there will be 13 in the final version. I really want to emphasize how much of a difference changing your sigil made. With the Pious sigil I was able to play a full magic role, which turned out to be one of the strongest setups, but trying to cast spells with the Tall sigil was just a waste of MP. Likewise, the Tall sigil gave me the best DPS, whereas the Oracle sigil made me not want to attack at all because of how little damage I was doing, and I instead focused on applying debuffs and healing. What worries me is that the stat boosts and penalties provided by the sigils were flat, and this might result in the individuality of classes being lost as you level up, but this remains to be seen. There was no open world in the test version, and whether the full version will have that is something we'll eventually see, but personally I wouldn't get my hopes up. Instead, you would go on missions that were basically small quests in an instance part of the open world. You were first given a choice of 3 missions, and each of these would have their own follow-up missions provided that you didn't fail the first one. Beating the second mission fast enough also unlocked a secret mission that was the same no matter what you chose first. The missions were fun, but they lacked variety and inspiration. All of them were either kill these enemies or kill these enemies while protecting this other thing. A good randomized algorithm could probably generate these. The enemy variety did add some spice to the missions, but I still hope they expand on the variety in the final release. This is only speculation on my part, but I think the mission structure is the way it is so that Square can easily add new missions with future updates like they do with the base game. The timed quests always felt out of place in the single-player experience, but something like that would fit perfectly in Comrades, assuming Square continues to support this game in the future. Creating simple yet low-quality missions is an easy way to provide lots of new content to the game in the future, and to be honest, as long as the combat system is good, I'm fine with it. I just really wish there'll also be some missions with a little more substance to them. Between missions you would return to camp where EXP was tallied and you were given food buff based on the ingredients you found during the mission. Personally, I really didn't like the food buff system in Comrades. The buffs can have a huge impact on the mission, but they're arbitrarily chosen by the game, which is a direct downgrade back to the episodusque format. You can affect it with what you pick up, obviously, but the camp also has a set of randomized ingredients as well. I think it would have been better to give us the option to choose from a number of available dishes. Each party member could vote for a dish, and in the case of a tie, one of them would be chosen randomly. Something as powerful as this should never be completely up to some computer algorithm. I previously said that Comrades has a level of difficulty to it, but this was inconsistent to say the least. The first missions of each set were laughably easy. The second missions on the other hand had massive difficulty spikes when the boss came around, but the trash mobs were, well, trash. There was no point in ever dodging their attacks, and you were a liability if you played anything but a DPS role before the boss. After playing the missions a couple times, I always just looked forward to the boss because everything else before that was almost literally holding circle to win. They were still fun and flashy the first few times through, but the boss fights were where Comrades definitely shined the most and where the combat system got to show its full potential. I didn't play much around with the character creation, but it seemed pretty good for the most part. There was a distinct lack of clothing and hair options, but that's most likely down to this being a test version. Bugs and glitches were also all over the place, probably for the same reason. There were also huge connectivity issues, but they were luckily fixed with a patch. Comrades has been my most anticipated piece of DLC for Final Fantasy XV, and playing the closed online test has only solidified that. To be completely honest, it was much better than what I expected. It's not perfect by any means, it's got a lot of issues, especially in the mission structure, but the core combat gameplay is solid, if slightly unbalanced in its current state. I personally haven't been this excited for a multiplayer component since getting into Dark Souls PvP. I already enjoyed the buggy online test more than either of the two full DLCs we've had. If you like multiplayer and didn't completely hate Final Fantasy XV's combat system, I definitely recommend trying out Comrades when it finally comes out. Anyway, thanks for watching and take care.